This archivist, a man named Dr. Alastair Finch, a man who dedicated 40 years of his life to a dusty corner of the state archives, was offered an early retirement package. A very generous one. A promotion to a prestigious, non-existent position, with one unspoken condition: he was to permanently misplace an entire collection of microfiches. Microfiches that held the original donation receipts for what is now one of the most celebrated universities in this country. Receipts that prove, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that every stone, every brick, every hallowed hall of that institution was built on a lie. A lie of theft, of racial terror, of murder. These weren't mere suggestions for Dr. Finch. These weren't theories. These were cold, hard facts, etched into the brittle paper of history. Facts the legacy families who still profit from that silence, the very families whose names adorn the university's most prominent buildings, desperately need to keep buried. This isn't just a story about a university. This is about how power works. How the truth is scrubbed. How entire departments are funded, entire careers made and unmade, just to keep this buried, to keep you from ever seeing the blueprints of their empire. But what if I told you that same Dr. Finch, before he vanished into his well-deserved retirement, made one copy? A single, grainy, almost illegible copy of one of those receipts. The most damning one. A receipt that will rewrite your understanding of power, of justice, of what it means to inherit a legacy of blood money. It will give you the evidence to shatter denial forever, not just for this university, but for every hidden injustice echoing in your own streets, in your own history, in your own family name. Do you know that feeling? The knot in your gut, the one that tells you something is wrong, deeply wrong, with the story you've been told? You've felt it, haven't you? You walk through a town, a park, a monument, and there's a silence, a vacant stare in the air where memory should be. A ghost of a lie. It haunts you. You've tried to find answers. You've gone searching. Listen. I remember standing in the grand, hushed halls of the city's historical society. I asked the curator, a kind-faced woman with spectacles perched on her nose, about the Northside incident of 1923. The one my grandmother whispered about, always in low tones, always with a tremor in her voice. The riot. The massacre. The way a whole thriving black neighborhood, vibrant and rich with life, was simply gone. Burned to the ground. She smiled, a little too brightly, her eyes a little too blank. Oh, yes, she said, a very regrettable period. Economic tensions, you know. Community friction. She handed me a glossy pamphlet about the city's post-war industrial boom. Not a word. Not a single word about the fire, the shots, the bodies. Nothing but a placid, dismissive wave, designed to end the conversation. Designed to make you feel foolish for even asking. The sting of that erasure. The casual cruelty of it. A history, an entire community's trauma, reduced to economic tensions and swept under the rug of polite society. You can feel the gaslight burn your skin, can't you? That's not history. That's a cover-up. Maybe you felt it closer to home. At a family reunion, the kind where everyone gets a little too loud, a little too comfortable with the family myths. You, perhaps, stumbled upon a dusty old newspaper clipping, a deed, a photo. Something that showed a celebrated ancestor, a pillar of the community, was involved in something ugly. Something unspeakable. A land grab. A whitecapping incident. A lynch mob. You brought it up. Carefully, hesitantly. Did you know Great Uncle Silas was involved in this? And you watched the room go cold. The forced coughs. The sudden, intense interest in the potato salad. And then the attacks. You're just looking for trouble. Don't dredge up old dirt. He was a man of his time. You're ruining the day. The anger, the outright denial, the way your own blood turned on you for seeking the truth. The way they protected the lie, defended the monster, because his story was intertwined with their comfort, their inheritance, their very identity. You feel the loneliness of that moment, don't you? The profound sense of betrayal. The knowledge that some truths are too dangerous for even your own family to face. Or maybe it's in the land itself. You drive to the coordinates. The old maps, the faded photographs, they show a bustling street. Businesses, homes, churches. A whole world, a whole life. A community. Friedman's Bottom, perhaps. Or Black Wall Street. Or simply the quarters. And now? A vacant lot. Or worse, a strip mall. A generic gas station. A gleaming, modern apartment complex with no history, no memory. Not a single plaque. Not a single marker. The land itself pretends nothing happened. No cries. No gunfire. No homes burning. Just smooth asphalt. Just manicured lawns. The cold void where history should be, where lives once throbbed with purpose and joy. The physical erasure. The arrogance of it. As if the land could forget, even if the bones beneath it cannot. It's like a scream caught in your throat, a story trying to push its way through the concrete, but silenced by the sheer weight of organized oblivion. This isn't just about feeling uncomfortable. This is about feeling the active suppression of truth. The careful editing. The deliberate amnesia. It's about the quiet rage that builds when you realize that what you were told was history, was in fact, a carefully constructed illusion. A comfortable bedtime story for the powerful, woven from the silence of the oppressed. You're not crazy. Your gut is right. The unease, the anger, it's not just a feeling. It's a signal. A signal that something was stolen. Something was hidden. Something was violently, purposefully erased. They want you to feel isolated. They want you to think it's just your imagination, your overactive conscience. But what I've found, what I've spent years digging through, proves it's not an accident. It's a system. A vast, intricate, meticulously engineered system of forgetting. State-sanctioned history. Complicit institutions, their endowments swollen with blood money. Wealthy dynasties, their fortunes built on buried crimes, their names now synonymous with philanthropy, not plunder. The media machinery, trading in comforting myths, echoing the official line, year after year. This isn't just about a few bad actors. This is about the very foundations of how we understand our past, how we tell our stories, how we build our future. And the truth? The truth is a wrecking ball to that carefully constructed facade. My name is Elias Thorne. I am not a tenured professor with a comfortable sabbatical. I am an angry researcher. A dogged archivist. A grandchild of those who both suffered and, yes, sometimes complicitly stood by, caught in the terrifying machinery of their time. I am someone whose family history held one of those yawning silences, a blank space where a generation of ancestors should have been. My own great-grandfather, a man hailed as a pioneer, a builder, a man whose name still graces a minor street in our town, was also a signatory on the White Citizens' Resolution of 1917. A document that led directly to the forced displacement of dozens of black families, their homes and land taken under dubious legal pretexts. I found his name, right there, on a brittle, yellowed page in a forgotten county clerk's ledger. My blood ran cold. The man I knew only through sepia-toned photos and heroic family tales. The shame, the anger, it fueled me. It still fuels me. I dig in the digital graves of history. I spend my nights sifting through scanned microfilms, cross-referencing redacted census data, piecing together fragments of lost court transcripts that mysteriously burned in a courthouse fire in '62. I chased down leads that people wished would disappear, knocked on doors of descendants who slammed them shut, and stared at the empty spaces in official narratives, spaces that scream louder than any written word. I found suppressed archaeological reports that show mass graves exactly where the city claims nothing happened. I've uncovered unpublished chapters from official biographies that detail the real mechanisms of theft and terror, conveniently omitted from public editions. They want you to believe the story is too complex, too nuanced, too far in the past to matter. They want you to believe that racism is just a vague, abstract concept, a regrettable blot on our otherwise pristine history. But I'm here to tell you that it was precise. It was engineered. It was a machine. There were laws. There were meetings. There were policies. There were orders. There were names. There were dates. There were documents. And they were all designed to inflict harm, to steal, to control, to erase. Elite universities, the ones with million-dollar endowments and ivy-covered walls, they teach this true, unvarnished history in closed seminars for $50,000 a pop. They dissect the machinery of oppression, the legal precedents, the economic motives. They know. They teach it to their future leaders, but they feed you, the public, the fairy tale. The sanitized version. The palatable lie. While you get the feel-good narrative in your public schools and history textbooks, they're showing their elite students exactly how it was done, so they can replicate or, perhaps, perpetuate it. That alone should enrage you. This isn't about just pointing fingers at some amorphous bad guys. This is about holding a magnifying glass to the precise mechanics of injustice. To the papers, the signatures, the money trails, the quiet agreements made in smoke-filled rooms, the public declarations made to distract. And nowhere is this clearer than in the story of this university. A shining beacon of learning, a monument to progress, built directly atop the ruins of stolen lives, stolen land, and stolen futures. The official story is clean. A benevolent founder. A generous donation. A vision for the future. But the whispers have always been there. The local legends about the cursed land, the strange disappearances, the sudden wealth of certain families coinciding with the sudden destitution of others. They called it progress. They called it eminent domain. But what if it was something far darker? What if the very first act of creating this celebrated institution was an act of profound, calculated racial injustice? An injustice so deep, so foundational, that it still reverberates today, in the wealth gap, in the lingering trauma, in the unacknowledged shame. I spent years chasing shadows, trying to validate those whispers. Searching for the legal filings, the land deeds, the minutes of forgotten city council meetings. I kept hitting walls. Documents lost. Archives damaged by flood. Witnesses unavailable. But then, I found him. Dr. Alastair Finch. The reclusive archivist. The one who spent his life watching history get rewritten, seeing the pencil strokes of erasure in real time. He knew. He saw the original donation receipts. The ones that didn't just mention land, but also the assets on that land. Assets that weren't buildings or crops. Assets that were people. He copied just one. One single, faded receipt. He knew it was enough. Enough to crack open the entire facade. Enough to expose the specific machinery of theft and terror. This isn't a theory. This isn't conjecture. This is the smoking gun. This is the precise piece of paper they thought was gone forever. The one that proves the lie. The one that reveals the exact method, the legal loophole, the financial transaction that enabled the systematic dismantling of a vibrant, self-sufficient black community to clear the ground for what they would call a university. This document doesn't just name the founder. It names the conspirators. It lays bare the economic incentives. It exposes the dehumanizing language used to justify their actions. It is a map to the precise machinery of harm. And I have it. Elias Thorne has it. And now, you will have it too. Get ready. Because in just a moment, I am going to show you the one document they thought was lost forever that names everyone responsible. The actual financial record. The legal paper trail. You will see, with your own eyes, how a single, seemingly innocuous phrase, used in official declarations and later echoed in every textbook about the university's founding, is a deliberate code. A chilling, dehumanizing code designed to hide the massacre, the theft, the brutal reality of how a powerful institution was truly born. And I will show you the 1965 photo album, salvaged from a forgotten storage locker, an album filled with vivid, undeniable images of the vibrant town, the thriving community, the families, the businesses that officially never existed, according to all the official records. That album, those photos, they are the faces, the lives, the memory they tried to bury under concrete and silence. It all begins with that first receipt. The truth is about to be unearthed. This single, faded receipt, alongside that 1965 photo album, isn't just evidence of a forgotten atrocity, it's a blueprint for the architecture of racial humiliation. It's the smoking gun that reveals how the theft, the displacement, the murders, weren't random acts of violence or isolated incidents. They were the predictable, efficient output of a perfectly calibrated machine. You see, the seemingly innocuous phrase in the university's original charter and donation receipts, the one that referred to the community and their homes not as property or residences but as undeveloped assets requiring strategic realignment, wasn't just a euphemism. It was the silent script of white supremacy in action. This phrase, later echoed in countless public declarations about urban renewal and progress, was a deliberate code. A chilling, dehumanizing code designed to legally and morally strip away the humanity of black families, making their homes, their businesses, their very lives, expendable in the name of institutional expansion and profit. This isn't just about a document, it's about understanding the language of erasure, the bureaucratic lexicon of racial hate that makes theft and terror palatable to polite society. And the photos in that album? They are the vibrant, laughing, defiant faces that refuse to stay undeveloped assets. They are the living, breathing contradiction to every single lie, every single calculated act of dehumanization. This isn't just about one university's dark secret. This is about pulling back the curtain on how racism functions not as individual prejudice, but as an invisible operating system, deeply embedded in our institutions, our laws, our language, our very perception of reality. We're not talking about bad apples, we're talking about the orchard itself, poisoned at its roots. This is the poison of racial commonplace, woven into the fabric of everyday life, so ingrained that it often goes unnoticed, accepted as just the way things are. It's the subtle, constant degradation of microaggressions as death by 1,000 racial cuts, eroding dignity, chipping away at self-worth, making you doubt your own sanity. It's implicit racial bias as a conditioned reflex of a racist society, where assumptions are made, opportunities denied, and injustices excused without a single overt hateful word, simply because the system has trained minds to see certain people as less, as other, as undeveloped assets. And when that quiet erosion explodes into overt violence, into mass displacement, into massacre, that becomes racial violence as spectacle, designed to terrify, to control, to reassert a racial hierarchy. The entire process of denying and covering up these atrocities? That's systemic racial gaslighting, designed to make victims question their own experiences, their own memories, their very reality. This structural racism operates under many names, many guises. It thrives on the silent permission of racial complicity, where those who benefit, or those who are simply too comfortable to question, allow the machinery to hum along, undisturbed. It's executed through the bureaucracy of racial hate, where seemingly neutral laws, policies, and financial instruments are weaponized to achieve racialized outcomes, just like calling families assets on a donation receipt. And it's perpetuated by the myth of the racially isolated case, the insidious lie that every instance of injustice is an unfortunate anomaly, a regrettable misunderstanding, rather than a predictable output of the underlying system. This is why our traditional responses to racism have often failed. They treat symptoms, not the disease itself. They try to fix individual moments, while the entire architecture of oppression stands firm. Think about it. We're often told to just ignore it. Don't give them the satisfaction. It's not worth your energy. But ignoring racism is not strength, it's racialized spiritual self-mutilation. It's turning off your pain alarm while the racial aggression metastasizes into racial trauma. It's asking you to absorb blows without reacting, to internalize the poison while pretending it doesn't sting. Ask anyone who has spent years ignoring racism if their sense of racial dignity is intact or if the ghosts of those racist moments still haunt their nights. They'll tell you it's a heavy burden, a crushing weight of unaddressed injury. The pain doesn't disappear, it just goes underground, festering. Or perhaps you've heard, it was a misunderstanding, or been urged to engage in dialogue. This is often just mopping up the blood of racial injury while the weapon remains in hand. You exhaust yourself explaining your humanity to someone following a manual written to deny it, a manual called racial privilege. True dialogue requires equal power, an acknowledgement of shared humanity, and racism exists precisely to destroy that equality first. It's not a misunderstanding when one party systematically benefits from the subjugation of another, it's a strategic design. Attempting dialogue in such an imbalance often forces the marginalized to perform emotional labor, to educate their oppressors, rather than addressing the structural issues. The demand for dialogue becomes another tool to maintain the status quo, deflecting from accountability and delaying real change. It's a deflection, a stalling tactic, allowing the system to regroup and continue its work. What about legal action alone? Take them to court. Sue them. While necessary in some cases, it's often a financed mutilation of a symptom. It may cut a branch, achieve a small, localized victory, but the root system of racial power remains untouched, growing back stronger and more discreet in its next form. It's expensive, emotionally draining, and fundamentally focuses on individual acts of discrimination rather than the systemic conditions that produce them. A lawsuit can't dismantle the fundamental logic of undeveloped assets requiring strategic realignment if that logic is built into the very laws and economic structures of a nation. It offers individual redress, perhaps, but it rarely rewrites the pervasive, ingrained script that allows these injustices to occur repeatedly, just in new guises. And the most insidious of all, be the bigger person. Forgive and forget. This isn't compassion, it's a mandate for racial amnesia imposed on the victim to keep the engine of racial abuse well-oiled and silent. Forgiveness is a personal, sacred choice. Mandated forgetting is a tool of oppression, designed to absolve the perpetrators, to silence dissent, and to deny the ongoing impact of historical and present injustice. It demands that the aggrieved erase their own pain for the comfort of the aggressor. It's a silencing mechanism, a way to move on without ever confronting the truth, ensuring that the same patterns of harm will repeat, unlearned and unaddressed. Ask anyone asked to forgive and forget if their sense of racial dignity was restored, or if the ghosts of those racist moments continued to haunt their nights, now coupled with the guilt of feeling unable to perform a requested absolution. The answer is often a resounding confirmation of continued pain and unresolved trauma. So, if traditional solutions are traps, what then? What is the secret mechanism to truly confront and disarm racism? The answers aren't new, they've simply been suppressed. This is an anti-racist understanding forged in the crucible of resistance, passed down through generations. Its dramatic origin story isn't found in university textbooks, but in the clandestine wisdom of those who survived. It comes from Black and Indigenous community elders and radical psychologists in the 60s and 70s, mapping the psychic violence of racism, their groundbreaking work systematically suppressed, dismissed as radical or anecdotal. It's hidden in the suppressed public health studies on the physiological impacts of racial stress and weathering on the body, studies that meticulously documented how racism literally shortens lives, breaks spirits, and sickens communities. And perhaps most powerfully, it's found in the ancient strategies of cultural and spiritual resistance preserved in oral histories, from the defiant sanctuaries of Quilambos to the hushed, powerful resilience of hush harbors, which understood survival as outsmarting the system's mind games, recognizing the racial patterns before they could inflict maximum damage. From these profound, often hidden wellsprings of knowledge, a powerful methodology emerged. I call it the Racial Reality Decoding Protocol. This isn't just about understanding racism intellectually, it's about an operational shift in how you perceive, process, and respond to racialized experiences. It teaches you to see the racial wiring behind the light switch of the offense, to understand that the individual act is merely a manifestation of a deeper, pre-programmed system. It disarms the internalized racial trap before it snaps shut on your self-worth, by giving you the intellectual and emotional tools to immediately contextualize the aggression, to recognize its source not as a flaw in you, but as a deliberate function of the system. It transforms the isolated racist event into a readable page from the system's manual of oppression, allowing you to identify the specific tactic, the particular code, the precise mechanism being deployed against you. Imagine the profound shift this creates. This knowledge isn't about avoiding pain, it's about transforming it into power. Picture this: you walk into the room where the racist incident happened, the one that once made your stomach churn with shame and confusion. Now, instead of that gnawing self-doubt, you carry the precise analysis of the racial power dynamic that occurred. You see the perpetrator not as a random aggressor, but as an unwitting agent of a system, and suddenly, their power over you dissipates. The shame lifts, replaced by clarity. You reclaim your racial narrative, moving from being a recipient of racial aggression to a diagnostician of its mechanics. Or consider your child, who asks about an incident they experienced, the echo of your own past racialized pain. Instead of a hesitant lesson in racialized pain, you offer a lesson in critical racial understanding and empowered resistance. You give them the tools to decode the moment, to recognize the script, to understand that the aggression is not a reflection of their worth but a signal of a systemic malfunction. You break the cycle of racial trauma, equipping the next generation with an armor of knowledge, fostering resilience and a deep-seated sense of racial authority. Finally, you look in the mirror, and you no longer see a victim of racism, someone constantly reacting to external aggression. You see a specialist in a racial system you did not create but now master. You become an interpreter of its codes, a reader of its silent scripts, an expert in its architecture. Your pain transforms into an unshakable racial authority, a deep understanding that allows you to navigate racialized spaces with an inner sovereignty, a profound sense of self-worth that no microaggression, no denial, no act of erasure can penetrate. This isn't just about surviving racism, it's about thriving beyond it, intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually. It's about reclaiming sovereignty over your own racialized mind and story. This knowledge, this racial reality decoding protocol, is dangerous to the racial status quo. It threatens the comfortable illusions, the quiet complicity, the very foundations of systemic racism. That's why it has been suppressed, why its proponents have been marginalized. But it's here now. And for those of you watching, truly engaged with this truth, I am going to reveal the first practical step to disarm racism. This is not a theory, it is an actionable tool, ready to be deployed. Understand this engine of racism. This is the key to the racial trap. Now see the racial mechanics. But I must warn you. When this video reaches a certain number of views, when this message begins to spread, the pressure from those invested in racial silence to bury it will increase exponentially. They will try to discredit it, to dilute it, to make it disappear. They don't want you to have this power. They need you to remain disoriented, isolated, and reactive. They need you to stay locked in the old, ineffective narratives. Don't let them. This moment, right now, is your window. You've seen how deeply the roots of racial aggression can twist, how its mechanisms are built to disarm and dismantle your sense of self, often without you even realizing the precise architecture of the attack. Now, here is the key to disarming racism, a first practical action of the decoding strategy that is so simple, so free, and so intellectually undeniable, it will begin to transform your experience of racial incidents immediately. This isn't a theory, it's a tool. This isn't about endlessly debating the existence of racism, it's about surgically removing its power over you. We call it the racial pattern recognition drill. For 1 week, just 7 days, you're going to carry a small, dedicated notebook, or perhaps just use the Notes app on your phone. This isn't for journaling your pain, not for stewing in the sting of an injustice. This is for something far more potent. Every single time you feel that familiar internal tremor, that gut-wrenching clench, that sudden, unwelcome heat in your chest, whether it's a microaggression that slides under the radar, a coded comment that seems to hint at something darker, or a dismissive glance that makes you question your very presence, you don't internalize it. You don't let it settle into the familiar ache of racial injury that has plagued generations. Instead, you immediately activate your inner forensic psychologist. You document it with one clear, concise sentence. Think of it as a clinical observation, stripped of emotional baggage. Your sentence will follow a simple structure: today, at, time, in, context, person/action, deployed, specific racial tactic, e.g., stereotyping, tone policing, exclusion, gaslighting, tokenism, performative allyship, weaponized incompetence, to provoke, expected reaction, shame, silence, anger, self-doubt, isolation, compliance. That's it. Just one sentence. This isn't about elaborate descriptions of your feelings or the injustice of it all. This is pure, unadulterated data collection. You are not a victim recounting trauma, you are a scientist collecting empirical evidence. Let's unpack the profound power embedded in this deceptively simple act. When you feel the sting of a racial incident, your ancient limbic system, the emotional, reactive part of your brain, lights up like a Christmas tree. It's designed for fight, flight, or freeze. In the face of chronic, often subtle racial aggression, this system keeps you in a state of hypervigilance, an exhausting, soul-sapping existence that drains your energy and dulls your spirit. It's the physiological architecture of racial trauma. But by consciously documenting the incident, you are forcing your brain to engage the prefrontal cortex, the seat of logic, analysis, and executive function. You are literally moving the experience from a raw, emotional input to a categorized, intellectual output. You are transforming diffuse racial injury, which often feels like a shapeless, overwhelming cloud, into precise, categorized data points. Each entry is a small act of reclamation. You cease to be merely a recipient of harm, you become the lead researcher of the racism you experience, an active agent in understanding its patterns, its motives, and its precise mechanisms. This shift, from passive recipient to active observer, is the first, vital crack in the armor of racial trauma. It's the initial step in taking back your intellectual and emotional sovereignty. Over 1 week, you'll begin to notice patterns emerging. The seemingly random attacks reveal themselves as predictable tactics. The bewildering chaos transforms into a discernible strategy. You begin to understand that you are not encountering isolated acts of individual malice, but rather encountering the predictable outputs of a larger, systemic design. The power is already shifting. Listen to this story of racial transformation, a testament to the seismic shift that happens when you begin to apply this kind of forensic psychological lens to your own life. A man, let's call him David, who used this precise method after enduring years of subtle, yet relentless, racial profiling and dismissive treatment in his corporate workplace, shared something truly profound with me. Before this strategy, David carried a perpetual low hum of anxiety. Every interaction, every meeting, every casual hallway conversation was a potential minefield. He'd walk into the office bracing himself, constantly code-switching, meticulously monitoring his tone, his gestures, even his facial expressions, all to avoid giving any perceived reason for the subtle digs or outright exclusions. He was a high-performing professional, yet he felt perpetually diminished, always walking on eggshells, constantly internalizing the message that he didn't quite belong, that his presence was tolerated, not celebrated. The cumulative effect was soul-crushing. He felt his professional identity, his very sense of self-worth, being slowly eroded. He described it as a slow leak of dignity, a constant state of feeling less than, even when intellectually he knew his capabilities were immense. Then, he started the racial pattern recognition drill. He began to document the eye rolls when he spoke, the ideas he shared being ignored only to be praised when a white colleague repeated them 5 minutes later, the questions about his credentials that no one else faced, the casual suggestions that he should tone down his passion. Each became an entry. He documented the time, the context, the specific action, the racial tactic, and the intended emotional outcome. He stopped simply feeling the pain and started analyzing the mechanism. And then, in the 3rd week, something pivotal happened. His boss, a man known for his humorous jabs that often landed on marginalized employees, made a joke in a team meeting about David's natural hair, a comment that implicitly questioned his professionalism and suitability for the corporate environment. Old David, the David who hadn't yet adopted the drill, would have burned with silent, humiliated rage. He would have felt that familiar pit in his stomach, his face flushing, his voice catching, the shame bubbling up. He would have spent the rest of the day replaying the incident, feeling small, feeling disrespected, allowing it to gnaw at his confidence. But this new David, the researcher David, was auditing. In that instant, as the boss's words hung in the air, David's mind didn't default to the emotional limbic system. It immediately engaged the prefrontal cortex. He didn't feel the burning shame. Instead, his mind instantly categorized it: performative othering for group bonding. Tactic, microaggression, veiled insult, racial stereotype. Expected reaction, humiliation, self-silencing, reinforcement of social hierarchy. And in that split second, the emotional charge vanished. It literally evaporated. The comment still existed, but its power over him was gone. He looked at his boss not with rage or humiliation, but with a kind of clinical pity. He saw a man desperately reinforcing a racial hierarchy, deploying a cheap tactic to exert dominance and feel secure in his own precarious position. He saw the racial aggressor as someone running a program, not someone inflicting a personal wound. David didn't even need to respond verbally. The power the boss tried to wield dissolved in the air because David had named its source, identified its function, and thus rendered it inert within his own psychological space. For the very first time, David left a racist encounter feeling full of his own power, not empty of his dignity. That, my friends, is the shift. When you diagnose the racial virus, you don't just survive its onslaught, you develop the psychological antibody. You transform from patient to pathologist, from recipient of harm to expert on its mechanics. This isn't about ignoring racism, it's about making it powerless to dictate your emotional and psychological state. Now, let's go even deeper, beyond individual experience, to reveal something that will confirm the systemic, engineered nature of the racial mechanics we've been exposing. You've intuited this truth through your own experiences, through stories like David's, but what if there was tangible, irrefutable proof? What if the system itself had, perhaps accidentally, revealed its own cynical blueprint? In 2021, a confidential internal assessment from one of the world's leading global consultancies, a behemoth in the corporate advisory space, was leaked to an anti-racism researcher I collaborate with. This consultancy, ironically, boasts a highly visible diversity and inclusion division, presenting itself as a champion of racial equity. The leaked document, which I have seen and analyzed, was titled Cost-Benefit Analysis of Racial Equity Theater versus Structural Reform. Let that title sink in. Racial Equity Theater. They named it themselves. This wasn't a philosophical paper, it was a coldly calculated business report. And on page 9, there is a line so chilling, so stark in its corporate cynicism, that it serves as the definitive smoking gun. It reads, intervention models that focus on individual bias awareness and healing dialogues reduce grievance reporting by 68% and lower legal liability, while requiring zero redistribution of institutional power or resources. They are 400% more cost-effective than actual structural overhaul. Let that sink in. Read it again. This isn't an opinion. This is a corporate confession. It reveals the strategic calculus behind so many of the superficial solutions to racism we see propagated today. Think about it, all the workshops that focus on individual biases, the endless conversations and dialogues about racial pain, they are designed not to dismantle racism, but to manage it. Their primary function is to reduce the measurable output of racial injustice, which they quantify as grievance reporting and legal liability. This isn't about liberation, it's about risk management. It's about keeping the machine running smoothly, ensuring the existing power structures remain undisturbed. The document explicitly states these models require zero redistribution of institutional power or resources. This is the core betrayal. The very systems that claim to be helping you heal or become aware are, by their own admission, operating as a cost-effective alternative to actual, meaningful change. They are designed to anesthetize you to racism's effects, to teach you to manage your pain so that the machine itself can run smoother, uninterrupted by the inconvenient demands for actual justice. This document is the smoking gun. It proves that the game is rigged, that the mechanisms of supposed solution are often mechanisms of containment. It confirms everything you've suspected, that your pain is being monetized, your demands for change are being diverted into performative gestures. But knowing the rules, seeing the hidden blueprint, is not just about indignation. It is the absolute first step to breaking them. Because once you understand the system's game, you are no longer a pawn. You become a player with a full understanding of the board. Now, let's talk about what happens when you fully internalize this knowledge, when you apply the protocols we are building against racism not just as a temporary fix, but as a permanent way of being. Imagine a day. A perfect Thursday, free from the insidious grip of racial trauma. You wake up not with the ancestral weight of racial anxiety clinging to your spirit, not with the subtle bracing for the day's potential aggressions, but with a profound, unshakable peace. You drink your coffee, not scanning the horizon for microaggressions, but planning your creativity, your projects, your joy. Your mind is clear, unburdened by the constant negotiation of your identity in a world often hostile to it. This is not a fantasy, this is the reality of racial sovereignty. You arrive at work. A colleague, perhaps unconsciously, tries to gaslight you about a racially charged client interaction that happened yesterday, attempting to shift blame or minimize the racial dynamics you identified. You feel that old, familiar trigger, a flicker of indignation, a flash of self-doubt. But immediately beside it now sits your internal analyst, calm, observant, objective. You don't react emotionally. You don't defend yourself with frantic energy. Instead, you calmly cite your documented pattern from last week, the one you recorded in your notebook, the specific tactics you observed. You frame it not as an accusation, but as a systemic glitch, a recurring pattern that you've identified, and one that you're both caught within. You say, based on my observation last week, and similar instances I've noted, this interaction aligns with a pattern of, e.g., dismissing client concerns based on perceived racial demographics. My data suggests this is a systemic issue affecting our client relations, not an individual oversight. The room falls silent, not with tension, but with a new respect for your clarity, your precision, your unassailable data. You haven't engaged in emotional battle, you've presented facts, analyzed patterns, and revealed a truth that transcends individual blame. You have asserted your sovereignty without raising your voice, without losing your peace. You have disarmed the aggressor, not by fighting, but by diagnosing. You go home. Your niece, bright and sensitive, asks you how to handle a racist remark she heard at school that day. The old you might have told her to be strong, to ignore it, or to rise above, inadvertently asking her to internalize the pain and carry it alone. But this new, sovereign you doesn't teach her to simply endure pain. You teach her the first step of the audit to name the tactic, to identify the source, to disarm it intellectually before it can poison her spirit. You teach her to recognize the game being played. You give her a tool, not just advice. You look in the mirror, and the person looking back isn't just a survivor of racism. They are a scholar and a strategist of their own liberation. They are grounded, powerful, and deeply at peace. This is what happens when you stop carrying the poison of racial trauma and start carrying the antidote of knowledge, analysis, and strategic action. This is the blueprint for a life where racial aggression still exists, but its power to diminish, to hurt, to define you, is utterly neutralized. So now you have the first key. You've understood the profound psychological architecture of racial aggression, and you've begun to learn how to deconstruct its power over you. You've heard the overwhelming proof from lives reclaimed, like David's, demonstrating the immediate, transformative power of this approach. You've seen the hidden corporate blueprint that explicitly admits racism is often managed for corporate profit, not truly solved for human liberation. You can vividly visualize the racially sovereign life on the other side, a life of peace, power, and freedom from the ancestral weight of racial anxiety. This means you are ready. Ready for the complete map. Ready for the step-by-step architecture to not just survive the next racist incident, but to fundamentally dismantle its power to haunt your past, poison your present, or limit your future. This isn't just about coping, it's about thriving. This isn't just about understanding, it's about active, conscious, powerful liberation. Stay right here. Because awareness without action is just agony. And you? You deserve a blueprint for freedom. The deep mechanics of racial oppression, once laid bare, demand not just intellectual understanding but a complete, actionable counter-protocol. You now grasp how racism operates as a systemic program, infiltrating your mental architecture, eroding self-worth, and perpetuating cycles of trauma. Understanding is only the first phase of liberation. True power lies in dismantling these internal frameworks, replacing them with an impenetrable shield of self-sovereignty. This is not passive resistance, it is active, daily, strategic psychological warfare waged on behalf of your inherent dignity. This is your complete anti-racism protocol, a blueprint for reclaiming your mind, your spirit, and your narrative from racial hierarchies' corrosive forces. Forged in countless experiences, honed by the insights we've uncovered, it's now your personal freedom manual. Prepare to activate it. For the next 7 days, you will embark on a rigorous intelligence-gathering mission. This upgrades any previous naming exercise you might have considered. Every microaggression, subtle slight, or overt act of racial prejudice you encounter will no longer slip into unacknowledged pain. Instead, treat each incident as a critical data point in a comprehensive audit of your racialized landscape. The moment you perceive a racially charged interaction, internally categorize it. Is this a racial power play? This is when someone asserts dominance, seeks to diminish your presence, or denies your competence based on your race, aiming to reinforce a perceived hierarchy and make you feel less than. Next, consider if it's a racial gaslighting probe. This insidious mechanism targets your perception, it's the denial of your lived experience or the suggestion you are overreacting, making you doubt your intuition and internalize blame. Finally, is it an act of performative racism? This identifies comments or actions made not to directly harm you, but to gain approval from an audience, signaling allegiance to a racialized group, often masked as a joke. The impact remains damaging, but the root intent is external validation. You are not merely feeling hurt, you are meticulously filing a psychological brief. By categorizing, you systematically strip the incident of its raw emotional power, transforming it into actionable intelligence. You build your personal dossier on what happened, how it happened, and why it was designed to impact you. This practice immediately halts the emotional hemorrhage that typically follows such encounters, converting it into data that empowers understanding and prepares you for strategic counteraction. This is the first, crucial step in building an impenetrable wall against racism's psychological weaponry. The justification for the racial incident audit is foundational. This step cuts off the power supply to the internalized racism factory that has long operated within the subconscious. Unacknowledged racist incidents too often feed directly into emotional processing centers, where they are converted into shame, self-doubt, and trauma. Each uncategorized microaggression became a brick in the wall of internalized inferiority. By consciously categorizing each incident power play? Gaslighting probe? Performative racism? You reroute that information. You take the racist event from the primal, emotional brain, where it causes trauma, and redirect it to the analytical prefrontal cortex. Here, it ceases to be a personal affront and becomes data. It becomes a case study in systemic oppression, rather than a reflection of your inadequacy. This analytical shift is revolutionary. It disarms the bomb of shame before it detonates, transforming potential psychic injury into objective study and strategic awareness. You move from being a passive recipient of racial aggression to an active, informed investigator, a curator of facts that expose the system, rather than internalize its lies. Once you have named and categorized the racial incident, the next critical move is to sever its energetic and psychological hold on you. This is the detachment drill, a powerful 10-second mental ritual designed to create an immediate, impermeable barrier between you and racism's toxic residue. The moment you identify the incident, activate this drill. You will visualize the racist words or actions not as a personal truth, but as a pre-recorded, broken message emanating from the decrepit, failing system of white supremacy or racial hierarchy. It's an old, glitching tape playing tired, dehumanizing rhetoric. Now, here's the visualization. You see a literal wall of silent, bulletproof, perfectly clear glass instantly materializing between you and the source of that racist message. This wall is impenetrable. The sound waves of their words, the energy of their actions, may hit the glass, but they do not penetrate. They do not reach you. For those 10 seconds, breathe deeply, steadily, and acknowledge this truth: this is not about my worth. This is merely the ideology of racism speaking through a mouthpiece, an agent of an antiquated system. You are observing the racism, not absorbing it. You are acknowledging its presence, but denying its power over your internal landscape. This short, potent ritual creates an immediate, non-negotiable psychic boundary. It recognizes the attack isn't directed at who you are as an individual, but at the racialized identity the system has assigned you. This effectively severs the psychic hook that attempts to embed shame, doubt, and inferiority deep within your subconscious. You consciously reject the premise of their aggression. This is your active refusal to participate in your own racialized diminishment. The profound justification for the detachment drill is that it installs the psychic firewall against racial toxicity. The goal of racism is to plant corrosive seeds of doubt and self-hatred directly into your psychic soil. Each racist comment attempts to inject poison, whether it's the rust of inferiority, the acid of anger, or the paralysis of shame. Without a deliberate psychic barrier, these toxins are absorbed, accumulating as internalized racism and chronic stress. The detachment drill acts as an immediate, impenetrable shield. By visualizing the bulletproof glass, you literally train your brain to reject incoming toxic data. You teach your subconscious these messages are external, systemic noise, not internal truth. This ritual melts the rust of inferiority the comment tries to deposit in your mind. It prevents the acid of their prejudice from burning away your self-esteem. It allows you to process the event intellectually, as data, rather than emotionally, as a wound. This detachment is not indifference, it is a strategic act of self-preservation. It is the conscious installation of an operating system update that filters harmful racialized inputs, ensuring your core self, your intrinsic worth, remains untainted and whole, even in the face of sustained racial aggression. You are not ignoring the problem, you are preventing it from becoming your problem internally. After you have audited the incident and deployed your detachment drill, the final, crucial step in this protocol is to reclaim your narrative. This isn't about rehearsing for a fight you might have. It's about programming your subconscious with an unwavering code of racial dignity and authority, ensuring that your internal script always reflects your true power, regardless of external aggression. At the end of each day, or at a specific, quiet time, you will revisit one documented racist incident from your audit. Choose one that still resonates, or one where you felt particularly disempowered. Now, you will rewrite the script. You will physically write down or speak aloud into a recorder the powerful, calm, one-sentence response you could have said to affirm your humanity, assert your boundaries, or call out the injustice with crystal clarity. Alternatively, you will articulate the dignified action you could have taken to reclaim your space, your peace, or your authority. This isn't about regret or self-recrimination for what you didn't do in the moment. It's about conscious, proactive reprogramming. You are not replaying the scene to relive the trauma, you are reauthoring the scene to instill a new, empowering default response within yourself. Perhaps it's a simple, "I heard what you said, and that is unacceptable." Or, "My worth is not up for discussion." Or, "Your discomfort does not justify your racism." Or, you might visualize yourself calmly disengaging, turning your back with an air of unshakable confidence, knowing that your time and energy are too valuable to waste on engaging with deliberate ignorance. The point is not confrontation for confrontation's sake, but the internal activation of your sovereign voice. Each rewritten scenario, each imagined dignified response, is a powerful affirmation. You are training your brain to access a state of grounded clarity and unshakable confidence, so that when similar incidents occur in the future, your automatic response is no longer one of frozen shock, internalized shame, or reactive anger, but one of composed power and resolute self-respect. This is how you proactively build a future where you dictate the terms of your own racial reality. The profound justification for the narrative reclaim is that it serves as the decolonizing cleanse for your mental landscape. For too long, the narratives imposed by racism, narratives of inferiority, victimhood, and powerlessness have been subtly, or overtly, etched into the neural pathways of those it targets. These scripts become default internal responses, manifesting as self-doubt, imposter syndrome, or a struggle to assert boundaries in racially charged situations. The narrative reclaim actively flushes out these old, damaging stories. You are not just writing a new sentence, you are literally rewriting the neural pathways that colonialism and systemic racism tried to carve into your mind. By consciously envisioning and articulating a powerful, dignified response or action, you are creating new, stronger, more empowering neural connections. You are teaching your brain to access a reservoir of racial dignity and authority that has always been your birthright, but which racism sought to suppress. This daily practice is an act of neurological self-determination. It shifts you from a reactive stance, where you are constantly responding to external racial aggression, to a proactive stance, where you are the sovereign architect of your internal experience. You dismantle the insidious internal programming of racial inferiority and install the robust, self-affirming code of sovereign racial identity. This isn't about being ready for the next racist encounter, it's about becoming so deeply rooted in your own worth that external racial aggression becomes a temporary disturbance, rather than a deep cut. You are literally reprogramming your automatic system from one of racialized vulnerability to one of unassailable racial power. This isn't merely a theoretical framework, this is an urgent call to action, a liberation plan designed for immediate implementation. You can start Step 1, the Racial Incident Audit, the very moment this video concludes. What are you waiting for? Another year of silent corrosion from the ceaseless drip of microaggressions? Another incident where you leave a room, a conversation, or a situation feeling racially diminished, your energy drained, your spirit bruised? The time to reclaim your mental sovereignty from racism is not tomorrow. It is in the very next hour. This protocol, powerful as it is, only works if you commit to it, if you actively engage with each step, if you choose to protect and empower your own psyche with the fierce dedication it deserves. You have been given the tools, the understanding, and the roadmap. The only missing piece is your unwavering commitment to your own freedom. This journey, however personal it may feel, is also inherently collective. Racism thrives in silence, in isolation, in the unspoken pain that festers within individuals. By implementing this protocol, you are not just healing yourself, you are contributing to a seismic shift in the collective consciousness. You are becoming a beacon of resilience, a living testament to the power of self-determination in the face of systemic oppression. Now, let's build this movement together. Share this video. Racism survives in the shadows of silence and isolation. Break that silence. Send this video to the person you know, the friend, the family member, the colleague who carries that same weary look after a racist encounter. Be the catalyst for their understanding, for their healing, for their empowerment. Create your own network of the racially aware, the resilient, and the deeply empowered. Every like on this video is more than just a click. It is a signal. It tells the algorithm, and indeed the world, that knowledge which meticulously dismantles racism, that frameworks for genuine, daily liberation, truly matter. It broadcasts that there is an army of people choosing to see the racial matrix not as an immutable reality, but as a construct that can be seen, understood, and disarmed in their own lives. Leave your like as a mark of solidarity, a visible commitment to this understanding, and a vote for a future where racial dignity is universally affirmed. I need you to make this real, to ground this understanding in tangible action. Comment below, right now, protocol activated when you commit to your 7-day racial incident audit. Let's fill these comments with names, with resolve, with a shared commitment to this daily practice of liberation. Let the world see that we are not alone in this struggle, but a collective waking up, a community building formidable tools for self-defense and empowerment against racial trauma. Also, do not hesitate to leave your questions about applying this protocol. I will be here, engaging, supporting, and guiding you through this transformative process. Finally, save this video. Pin it. Make it easily accessible. This is your manual, your personal guide for psychic self-defense against racism. In those moments when the world tries to sell you the old story of racial hierarchy again, when the doubt creeps in, when the weight of racial aggression feels overwhelming, come back to this. Rewatch Step 2, the detachment drill. Let these words, these visualizations, be your anchor of dignity, your immediate shield, your reminder of your inherent, unassailable worth. The choice is now binary, clear, and urgent. You can continue to be a battlefield for a racial war you didn't start, a silent recipient of injuries that are not yours to bear, or you can rise. You can choose to become the sovereign architect of your own racial peace and power. You have the blueprint. You have the tools. They are in your hands, ready for activation. We are not just healing ourselves from racial trauma, we are building a new language of unassailable worth, a new paradigm of racial dignity that will resonate through generations. Now go, and speak it into existence.